Beacon Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Summit, a community committed to feeding the human spirit as we heal the world. With all the opportunities doing things around Summit this morning and at the beach this wonderful Labor Day weekend, we are so glad that you chose to be with us this morning. Please look in your orders of service. We have a series of events and things coming up that you're welcome to attend. We'd love to have your attendance out, but there's a few things we want to point out for you. Starting next Sunday, we go back to normal, 2 services with a little twist. Our services are now at 9:30 and 11 a.m., not 11:15. So if you roll in here at 11:15, you second service attendees, you're going to be leaving you'll be coming in when the children are leaving. So get here at 11 so you can be a part of the beginning of the services. Also, the second thing at that service is our homecoming. So please bring your water from your various adventures this summer so that we can add it to our communal water that we use throughout the year to bless the babies and dedicate children and do various works with those. So please join, be a part of that. For our kids who are going back to school, all the parents say amen. School begins for many of you this week, and so as a part of a ritual of getting you sent off the best way we can, we're asking our kids to bring their backpacks so we can do a backpack blessing with that very water that we are going to be collecting and for using throughout the year. Please bring your backpacks for blessing so you can have a great school year. Finally, our small ministry registrations for our youth, our children, and our adults is happening right now, and spaces are filling up, particularly in the adult groups. So please visit our website, summitbeacon.org, for more information about how to register for those groups, many of which start on September the 16th, 2 weeks from now. At this moment, we would like to take a bit of time to turn and greet one another in fellowship. So please turn and talk to your neighbors and welcome them to service today. If I didn't say it already, thank you for being here and doing this today.
You're welcome. I didn't say hello. Are you the official? Do you normally come or are you?
You can stay seated for this part, and Alice is going to light our chalice for the work that we're doing today together, the worship we hold sacred, and for your presence. Anonymous source. I found this when I was in business school many years ago. And it's a story about rest. It's a story about Sabbath. It's a story about making time for what's important now versus waiting for later. An American businessman was on vacation in Mexico, and as he relaxed on the chair at the beach with his frosty drink in his hand, he noticed in the distance a fisherman coming in with his catch for the day. When the fisherman got closer, the tourist complimented the fisherman on his catch and asked him how long it took him to catch that many fish. "Not long," said the fisherman. "Then why don't you stay out longer?" asked the tourist. "Because this is enough for me and my family," explained the fisherman, gesturing to his few baskets of fish. The businessman frowned because this was puzzling. It was a weird answer for him. "So what do you do with the rest of your time?" he asked. The fisherman smiled. "Well, I sleep late, and I fish for a while, and then I play with my children, and take a siesta and spend some time with my wife. And then in the evening, I go into the village to visit my friends. I have a few drinks, I play the guitar, and sing a few songs. I live a full life." The American businessman really liked the fisherman, and he offered him some advice. "I have an MBA from Harvard, and I can help you. You should spend more time on your boat fishing, and then you can sell the extra fish and make more money and buy a bigger boat." "And after that?" asked the fisherman. "It gets even better. With the extra money from the bigger boat, you can buy 2 or 3 boats and eventually hire more people and operate a fleet of fishing boats. Instead of selling your fish to a middleman, you could deal directly with the processing plants. And after a while, you'd be able to open your own processing plant. Then you could leave this little village for Mexico City or for New York City, and there you could operate the whole enterprise. You could go global." "And after that?" asked the fisherman. "How long would that take?" 25 years, said the businessman. "And after that?" "Well, my friend, that's when the fun starts. That's when the business gets really big. You can sell stock in the company and make millions." "Wow, millions. What happens after that?" "Well, after that, you'll be able to retire. You'll be able to sleep in every day and do some fishing and play with your kids and take a siesta and hang out with your wife. And in the evenings, you can go into town and drink and sing songs with your friends." The fisherman stared blankly at the businessman, and then he smiled, thanked him for his advice, and walked away. I find myself on the daily acting very much like this businessman, just doing, and going, all in pursuit of that hoped-for ultimate dream, retirement. A time of rest and relaxation, but I got the working hard part down pat, but what I have a little trouble with is remembering that I have family and friends in my life right now. I have people that I should slow down for and spend time with. Could you help me remember to do that? Could you help me remember to take my Sabbath of sorts right now instead of waiting until the end? I appreciate it. Right now, our children are going to go to their small group. We'll be discussing Labor Day a little bit more. So I would like for you to sing us out with a little bit of a twist on De Colores, because we know how the tongue tying happened. So instead of singing the lyrics, you're going to sing la 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 la. And Nicole will lead you in that. Thanks.
Good morning. In the day-to-day, it can be easy to lose the sense of what we are given each moment. the air in our bodies, the gift of life of this community. Even in the trouble in our living, the struggle with a friend or a child that's being difficult, we can yet find the abundance. We can give thanks for those in our lives to struggle with. We can give thanks in the midsummer's heat for the earth. And here in this place, we practice the Sabbath, living into a different kind of time that invites us to pause, to wonder, and to give thanks. Out of this Sabbath, in this sanctuary, our morning offering will now be gratefully received. Give as you are able, for all acts done with an open heart have purpose.
This morning, we're going to offer you an opportunity to come up, as you often do in this congregation, and light candles. We will help you with the tapers. Often we do that during the course of the service, but today we'd like to have that as part of the service. Some quiet music will be playing. You can come up to light a candle for any reason. A sorrow in your heart that you need to commemorate, a joy to celebrate, just to witness to being alive today. So we invite you to come up and light a candle if you wish from the front. Light a final candle for all those joys and sorrows that are unsaid but remain deep in our hearts.
I'm going to read you a story. It's called The Rabbi and the Soap Maker. The story begins when a rabbi and one of his congregants, a soap manufacturer, out taking a walk. Suddenly the congregant burst out, "What good is religion? Look at all the trouble and misery in the world. After all these years, thousands of years of teaching about goodness, truth, and peace, and still the world is a mess. Still, after all those prayers and sermons and teachings, if religion is truly good and useful, how can this be?" The rabbi said nothing as they continued to walk along. After a while, he noticed a child playing in the gutter by the side of the road. "Look at that child," said the rabbi. "You say that soap makes people clean, but see the dirt all over that youngster? With all the soap in this world, after centuries of people selling and using soap, still this child is filthy. I wonder how effective soap is after all." "But Rabbi," the soap manufacturer protested, "soap obviously doesn't do any good until it's actually used." "Exactly my point," replied the rabbi. "Exactly my point."
Please rise as you are able and join me in singing hymn number 1. May nothing evil cross this door. If you do the
It is always a pleasure to be here in my home congregation at Beacon. For those of you who don't know, there's a little blurb about me, I guess, in the order of service. But my office is literally right up there in what used to be the old RE, part of the old RE wing, as it were, room for this building. And I run UU Faith Action NJ, which is our a voice for social justice and public policy advocacy, as many of you already know. So it's really a pleasure to be here, both my work home and my spiritual home. So here's an interesting question for you. Are you or we as good at reaching out for our religious values, for our deepest spiritual convictions, as we are for our soap? Every day, I bet, you hang out with some soap. Even if you had to skip the shower this morning on your rush into service, getting your things done, there's still the laundry detergent, those funny little tablets we now put in our dishwashers, hand soap. You and I will most likely reach for some form of soap before this day is out. And if not today, then definitely tomorrow. And if not tomorrow, I would like you to see me directly after the service, because we need to have a talk. But can we say the same thing about religious teachings, about the deepest truths of our communal and our personal soul journeys as we can of our soap? You might think to yourself, well, they're not really the same things, are they? The one you need for daily living, for physical safety and comfort, but religious truth, I could go weeks without thinking about that. Of course, you and I may not be the right sample set, given that we're here this morning on a Sunday, 4 services in this old-fashioned church building. So obviously we have some kind of concern about living a life of depth and meaning, which is what most anthropologists, and not a few you use, would call living a religious life. But I do wonder, including for myself as well, in case you're feeling a little chastised or about to be chastised, I wonder what impact it would have on the quality of our daily lives if we somehow, even in our questioning UU way, still reached out for spiritual truths, not in a just Sunday morning kind of way, not when we're listening to NPR and something happens to come on that reminds us of a larger truth, but with the same regularity, the same insistence as we do our soap. Which brings me right to the subject of this morning's service. I might have called it Reaching for Religious Soap, which is a catchier title than the one I came up with. But in truth, we're going to reflect more on the idea of Sabbath, of making a sanctuary for our souls in everyday life, the same way that we try to keep ourselves clean in our daily practice of hygiene. Because whether you meditate regularly or not, whether you have some sort of daily or weekly spiritual practice, there are many ways to be more intentional about paying attention to our souls. These ways don't require that you be particularly deep or especially spiritual. I always think of my mother, who was very practical, sitting out in the service saying, well, I'm going to tune out for this meditation part. These ways don't require that you are especially spiritual even, whatever that might mean. You needn't believe in God, in a personal or universal life force, though you most certainly can if that is your path to the holy. What you do have to do, absolutely, no question, and you know this before I say it, you have to turn up. Like you've done this morning. Though, of course, the great irony is that sometimes church or temple or even AA or yoga class don't actually help us to pay attention the way they might. But sometimes they do, which is why I suspect you're here. Sabbath is just an old-fashioned word that means a very simple thing. Turn up. Turn up. Be here. Listen get a little quieter than you normally do. Wait for it, whatever it might be. Stop moving so fast, just for a while. Easier said than done. Let's admit that right away, which is why Sabbath is our worship theme for the entire month of September. Maybe by the end of the month we'll get it. And of course, if it were easy, everyone would be doing it. So tomorrow is Labor Day, which means in modern American culture at least, we are just about to end our communal Sabbath time of summer. For many of us, though of course not all, that means making our peace with putting away the shorts and the flip-flops, at least until the weekends, of putting away our internal scrapbooks containing memories, both good and bad, I suspect, of beaches and grandkids and quieter streets. God, I've loved those quieter streets. Of watermelon and big tote bags and whatever else your summer has held for you. Now is the time to get back into school routines, of putting up with all the traffic again, mornings and afternoons of big yellow buses suddenly appearing, with a shift in light and temperature, with change. Now is a season of change. Once upon a time, this weekend held additional meanings too, and perhaps it still does for you. A time to value the power of laboring people, of people who may not have ever had advanced degrees or any degree at all, but who do know how to pave roads, something I couldn't do, build bridges, teach kids and adults, fix power lines, heal people. Before I go any deeper into the origins and meanings for Sabbath today, can we just take a brief moment, as we did with our singing of those two classic labor songs, to celebrate all those past and present who organized and stood up for their and our rights, for safer working conditions, for fair wages, for a 2-hour weekend, a 2-day weekend, which was the outcome of union demands for which we should be eternally grateful. I think of my own grandfather who worked on the railroad, and maybe you have others in your family. Let's just take a moment in our own way to honor anyone that we know who, from the labor of their hands and hearts, helped build all that is today. Actually, there's a very nice synergy, isn't there, with the idea of Labor Day and Sabbath. One cannot exist without the other. No labor, no break, no struggle, no breakthroughs, no paying attention, no realization. So let's go back to the beginning and have a quick refresher on where the whole idea of Sabbath originates. There's some real gems there for us, even though most of us probably don't celebrate any kind of Sabbath, at least consciously. I have no doubt there are many Sabbath traditions in many cultures, any time set aside from our regular routine as a kind of Sabbath, and we'll talk more about that later. But the word Sabbath itself comes to us with a deep history. It resonates for many of us, whether we were raised Jewish or Christian or nothing at all. Sabbath has roots in this culture, and deep roots for Unitarians and Universalists through our Puritan forebears. It comes to us via the Old English word Sabbat, which means Saturday as a day of rest, as observed in Jewish tradition. It came into English, down through Latin, and then Greek, from the original Hebrew, 2 words. The first, Shabbat, which means day of rest, but its oldest meaning is from the word Shabbat, he rested. And I think you know where this may be going. Because the religious concept of Sabbath in the Western European religious tradition begins here with he rested. In the first and second chapters of Genesis, everything begins. It's all set into motion out of what? Nothingness? The first Big Bang, written in ancient Hebrew. God creates a light within the darkness, separates heavens from earth, populates the whole earth with all things useful to humans, cattle and fish and fowl. And finally, on the next to last day, creates humankind. It takes 6 days to do each of these things. At the end, it happens. God, the all-powerful, the all-knowing, the maker of all things, God, in what seems like the most human move possible, takes a break. He rests. Shabbat. The actual language from the New Revised Standard Bible version reads as follows, and it's got real beauty to it, poetry. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished in all their multitude. And on the seventh day, God finished the work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all the work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and hallowed it, because on it God rested from all the work that he had done in creation. The idea behind Sabbath, according to hundreds, if not thousands of years of tradition, is that God set aside Saturday, the seventh day, as a holy day, a decision formalized later on during the Exodus. At the end, Moses went up to the mountain, and the fourth commandment, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. And it's interesting, as I did a little research about Sabbath, it turns out I always thought Yom Kippur, which is coming up, I think, on the 18th of September, is the holiest day in the Jewish calendar. But in fact, according to Jewish law, halacha, the holiest day is most likely Shabbat, every single Friday night through Saturday. The beginning of rest. It takes pride of place. It is the holiest day. In fact, observance of Shabbat is the benchmark used in formal Jewish law to determine whether a person is indeed religiously observant. If you belong to the Jewish community, one of the top ways of knowing that is whether you observe Shabbat. This may have more to do with showing up at services, being part of a community, but at its heart, right, at its heart, it's about something deeper, about slowing down, about showing up for the blessing, for a hallowed day, for God, for yourself. Ironically, it is in stopping work. You better be sitting down for this part, you Americans out there. It is in slowing down and paying a closer kind of attention that in ancient tradition, at least, and still in some cultures, to a certain Mexican fisherman. It marks the more observant person, the more spiritually realized one. Which brings me back to us here. Those of us who may be Jewish in our background or even in our observance, but also Unitarian Universalist, open-minded seekers after truth in many guises, found in the likeliest and unlikeliest of places, including Genesis. Did you think to look at the ancient traditions of Sabbath for a truth that might work for you today, whether you believe in a patriarchal biblical God or not? Put another way, very local, very of the moment. Is it possible or useful to keep even a small part of the lazier parts of summer? The unhurried bits, the phone doesn't get Wi-Fi here bits? What would it mean to incorporate little pieces of that in your daily life, like soap, to keep you clean or grounded or whole, healthy? What happens to us if all we know of Sabbath is the occasional Sunday service or the 3 times a year vacation break or a weekend breather that frankly can be as busy as the weekday, it's just a different kind of busy? What happens if we put all that off until the final break? Sabbath is meant to be a shelter, a sanctuary in the midst of the tossing and turning of life. It is in some ways a very clear realization. It's an honest appraisal of how tough a week can be, how tough a life can be. To stop and to take stock, to rest. This fall, observant Jews will also celebrate another festival called Sukkot. Sukkot is that time when temporary huts or shelters are built in yards or green space outside temples. And it does two things. It's to recognize the shelter of community and religious teaching during the Exodus from Egypt when they had no shelter. They were making tents out in the wilderness. And of course, it's even more ancient. It's pagan even, a time of celebrating harvest and the festival of the turning of this season. Another word for shelter is sanctuary, which is the word we use to describe the innermost heart of our house of worship. You're in the sanctuary right now. And that connects us to thousands of years of not just tradition, but of truth. That we all need a home within a home. We need a resting place. Sabbath is really just the recognition that we need sanctuary, not just for our bodies or our RE classes or our clergy or our programs, but for our minds and our hearts, for our growing spirits. It's a time to remind ourselves how incredibly lucky we are to have shelter, something so basic. I almost never think about that except when I get water spots on my ceiling. Sabbath is a sukkah. It's a sheltering hut, but one you can't see, and one you have to build. It doesn't just pop up out of the wilderness of your life. If you don't show up on Sunday morning, if you don't show up to yourself, to your children, to your partner, to your soul search, it won't necessarily pop up for you. It's a certain kind of work, oddly, in the great paradox of religious truth. You need to make Sabbath. And Americans know this as well as anyone else, and I suspect it's always been hard. Maybe modern life has made it harder. I think my grandparents had a hard time slowing down with all the things they had to do. Sabbath is a mnemonic device to recall that we are both seekers and makers of sanctuary. I want us to think, actually practice, how we can build a small rickety hut somewhere in our lives. And I mean a hut internally that will hold the space for the still small voice within, for Ruach, the wind of the Spirit, not gendered, not supernatural necessarily, but a wind that comes and goes and that we have to listen for. I wonder if you have that kind of space in a daily way, like soap. What I want to say now is I want to give you Sabbath homework, but of course that doesn't quite ring true. It doesn't seem right. How about, here is a Sabbath suggestion. And I'm going to make it for the coming week because we like small, discrete chunks of time. And also we need to practice. You don't go to the gym and immediately lift a bunch of weight. You go and someone talks to you and shows you the equipment and says, I'll see you tomorrow. That's what I want this to be. It's really very simple. Maybe you already do it. But it could be the seed of something larger in your life. If you don't go to the gym that first day, you're never going to the gym at all, perhaps. You've got to go once. I would like you to stop in your tracks at least once a day. Maybe you'll be able to stop outside. That's a nice thing to do. There's something about that for humans that connects us in a way we don't always connect. To look at the trees on your front porch before you jump into your day. Maybe you will stop next to your car, closing your eyes for 30 seconds, pretending you're going in, or, I don't know, just standing there. The one requirement for this week is that every day I would like you to stop at some point in the day and be conscious of stopping. And I think you all know what I mean. We all have those moments, don't we, where we realize this is what I keep forgetting to do. I wish I had remembered to do this yesterday, and I know I'm going to forget it tomorrow. But this thing, this is meaningful. Does that resonate for any of you? The one requirement is to stop. It's only a first step. I don't want to feed you religion light here. The religious quest, the pilgrimage, takes time and energy. It is not simple. It is not a straight line. You have to deal with fellow congregants sometimes and yourself even harder. But this is fundamentally a Sabbath place, a sanctuary. Even better, it's a sukkah. It's a kind of temporary, rickety, Velcro, duct taped together thing that we do in life. But it can be enough. It doesn't have to be gorgeous, that moment of time, but I want you to take it. And then over the course of this month, I think you'll be reflecting deeper and deeper on what that means. I'd like to end this morning with a poem by the poet William Stafford. It's called Being a Person, which is to say, I think, growing a soul, which is to say, celebrating life and stopping to do that. Be a person here. Stand by the river. Invoke the owls. Invoke winter, then spring. Let any season that wants to come here make its own call. After that sound goes away, wait. A slow bubble rises through the earth, begins to include sky and stars and all space, even the outracing, expanding thought. Come back and hear the little sound again. Come back and hear that call. Suddenly, this dream you are having matches everyone's dream. And the result is the world. If a different call came, there wouldn't be any world, or you, or the river, or the owls calling. How you stand here is important. How you listen for the next things to happen. How you breathe. Good Sabbath. Amen.
Won't you please rise as you are able and join me in singing our closing hymn, number 66, When the Summer Sun is Shining. remain standing for our benediction.
And actually, two things. Yes, why don't we do that circle thing that we sometimes do that's nice? If we hold hands, you do that, right? I'm not making this up. Yeah. So let's get in a big circle, hold hands or across hands and up at the top as well. And I'm gonna join you in 1 second, but I was remiss in saying, because we don't just reflect and have deep thoughts, we also are very clear actors in destiny, and I would like to invite you on Thursday to a rally in Trenton at noon. Several of us will be going down to help support immigrants and undocumented people to get driver's licenses in New Jersey. It's a very well thought out plan, and we hope the legislator and governor will work on that. There's also a climate march on Saturday that I know members of this congregation will be going. So both resting inwardly and acting outwardly is part of the religious path. So I give you Sabbath and I give you soap. When you clean or wash or reach for soap this week, may you think of just a brief moment for yourself and for creation. Just to breathe, to be here, to be whole, and to mark a Sabbath moment, knowing that it makes a difference.